visit the Hawaiian Islands, and we were in Rochester on staff at the church for just about 29 years. So they sent us to the Hawaiian Islands. And if you've ever been there, you'll know that they have this very unique drink. And it is called, it's unique to Hawaii, and it's called pog. You can find it in restaurants, you can find it in supermarkets, and it is a combination of passion fruit, orange juice, and guava juice, P-O-G. Now, if you were to go there and you want some, but you can't remember what Pastor Bruce said from the pulpit that day, and so you forgot the name of it, imagine yourself sitting in a beautiful restaurant overlooking the waters, the blue waters of Maui. On second thought, don't do that. I'll lose you all at the beginning of this message. But if you ever get there and the waiter comes and you ask them, I can't remember the name of this stuff, but it's a combination, and they will, it's 3 different fruits, and it makes a brand new fruit juice. They'll know what you mean. But you would not say this combination makes for very fine fruits juice, would you? You just wouldn't say, oh, it's a fruits juice drink, because you understand that the combination makes up a brand new drink, and it is a very similar thing. On the menu of Christian virtues, I'll tell you in a moment which one I'm talking about today, but on the menu of Christian virtues, the Apostle Paul uses this same terminology in Galatians 5:22, where Paul wrote, the fruit, singular, the fruit of the Spirit is love, and notice he does not say the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. He doesn't say the fruits of the Spirit, he says the fruit of the Spirit. And if you put them all together, what does it equal? LJPPKFGFGS. Can anybody pronounce that? Because I have tried. Can you? No, you're teasing me. Gus. No, it just doesn't work. But you get the idea. The idea is the same. The Bible explains that the mixing of these 9 wonderful flavors together makes for a delicious Christian who tastes just exactly like Jesus Christ. I get to talk about the fruit of the Spirit, goodness, today. But it's very important to know that all these flavors blend together. And it would be quite inappropriate, in fact, quite impossible, for someone to say, well, I'm a Christian, I have love, joy, and peace. But I'm working on the rest, I'm impatient, I'm unkind, I am no good, I am unfaithful, I am crotchety, and I am out of control. I mean, how would that be? But I do have love, joy, and peace. No, it's the whole, you get the whole package when you have the fruit of the Spirit. And think about Jesus, his powerful message. What if Jesus came to earth to show this brand new way, and yet he walked into a store and he pushed himself ahead of somebody and said, "Get behind me." And what if he was real grumpy all the time? What if little children wanted to come to him and he said, "Get away, you bug me. I want to," and then he would say, "But I've got a message from God." You know what everybody would say? We don't want to hear your message. Your attitude, your actions betray you. No, Jesus was just exactly the opposite. He was so incredibly winsome. Everybody wanted to be around him. Little children wanted to be around him. Prostitutes wanted to be around him. Tax collectors wanted to be around him. Sinners flocked to him. Why? Well, I think it partly has to do with what we're talking about today. He was so good. Now, we either have the fruit of the Spirit in our lives or we don't have the fruit of the Spirit in our lives. You cannot take orange juice out of Pog and still call it Pog. And you must have every one of the flavors for it to be what it is. And it is the same with the fruit of the Spirit. And so you must have every one of the 9 flavors of the fruit of the Spirit for you to have the fruit of the Spirit. Now, maybe some of them you have to a lesser degree. Maybe some of them you are working on harder than others. Maybe some of them come more naturally to you. But these 9 flavors, the fruit of the Spirit, are wonderful. So, let me ask a question. How are you? How are you? Good. Great. That's even better. When you ask this question, and if somebody said, "Okay, I guess," and let's say they're from Minnesota, that would be a very subtle signal that says, "I've had a tough week. I feel rotten. Don't ask me," Or in Minnesota, if you say, "I'm doing okay," that means you're really in a rotten mood. But most people, when you ask them, "How are you?" most people will say, "I'm good. Yeah, I'm doing good." And I believe that is the answer that God wants to hear, that we are doing good. Because as Christians, we have the fruit of the Spirit, goodness, in our lives. In fact, really, to be a Christian is to be like Jesus Christ. And there is an interesting line in the New Testament that is used to describe him, and it's found more than once. Jesus of Nazareth went around doing what? Good. Why? Because he was good to the core. Now, it's found in Acts, the 10th chapter, verses 37 and 38. You know what has happened throughout the province of Judea. Beginning in Galilee after the baptism that John preached, verse 38, how God anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the Holy Spirit and with power, and how he went around doing good and healing all who were under the power of the devil, because God was with him. And if God is with you, you're going to be good. And you're going to do good. That's just the way it is. To me, goodness is an especially interesting flavor of the 9 flavors. The Bible says, well, let me think of what people say when they refer to Christians in a derogatory way. Have you ever heard this? She's just a do-gooder. Or he's just a do-gooder. Let me ask you, think just for a moment now about this last week. Did you do something good for someone else this past week? Think about that. Because we have opportunities every day to be like Jesus, to do good. And if you do, you're just like Jesus. And if you don't, well, today is the first day of the rest of your life. Today is the beginning of a brand new week. And you are going to have all kinds of opportunities to do good. Now, to me, goodness is an especially interesting flavor of the 9 flavor recipe that the Bible says should be characteristic of a Christian life. It is particularly interesting flavor to me because it doesn't always taste the same. Most flavors, if you've tasted them once, you've tasted them for good. And they're pretty much always taste the same. Not so with goodness. Goodness can come in many different, varying forms. Sometimes it might not even feel like goodness at the time. If I were to ask, I need a taste test volunteer. Oh boy. Wait until I tell you what it is. I've got pure vanilla extract, and I just want somebody to take a whole spoonful. Whoa! Listen, you're wrecking my illustration. I was counting that nobody would. Yeah, 2 people raised their hand, and the first one pointing to the second one who raised his hand. Oh boy. You know, vanilla is in the United States of America, has been for years the number 1 top flavor. If you were to take a spoonful of pure vanilla extract, what would it taste like? Bitter. and that's the range where vanilla tastes. Anywhere from bitter to yummy. Woohoo! That is a great flavor there. So, it makes me wonder how it can be the number 1 best flavor, but it has been for years. So it is with goodness. Goodness sounds and smells so good. But the flavor of goodness can range from bitter to sweet. I remember my son Christopher, my eldest, Number one son out of three. First time he ever made brownies, he looked at the recipe and it said 3/4 cup of cocoa. So he thought it meant 3 or 4. So he put in 4 because he really liked chocolate. I still remember, it's like you chewed and chewed and it just got worse and worse, Oh boy. Let me illustrate it this way, because it not only refers to chocolate or to vanilla, but it refers to goodness. Goodness sounds and smells so good, but the flavor can range anywhere from bitter to sweet. Years ago, it's a true story, a physician was forced, because of circumstances, to perform surgery on his own little son to save his life. They were far from home. They had no medical equipment, and it was stressful for the dad and painful for the son. But the words of the father just prior to the surgery not only spoke to the little boy, but spoke to the father as well. Son, I am going to hurt you. But I would never, ever harm you. Son, I'm going to hurt you, but I would never harm you. And we can all think of examples of that. I certainly thought of some. Antibiotics is one. But another one that I thought of would be chemotherapy. If you get to the point, I have leukemia, and if you get to the point where my white cells got, at one point, 146,000, my good red cells, the neutrophils, were at 0, and a common cold would have killed me. You normally wouldn't want to take something like chemotherapy, which is poison. But when you're in a bad situation like that, I didn't have to take chemotherapy. They had a little pill. And they just gave me 2 a day. And it knocked my white cell count down to, right now, my doctor said, he retired, but just before he retired, he said, you are in partial remission. That was great to hear. But there are people who take chemotherapy, which is poison, because the poison is meant to kill the cancer. And I know my mother has macular degeneration. And about once every month and a half, she goes into the doctor. This gives me the willies to think about it. And she, it's like you can't not look because they tape your eye like wide open. And then they bring a long needle. Nope. But if it's either that or going blind, what would you do? Life. I'd take the needle, and I don't know what I'd do. Pretend it's a hot dog coming into my mouth or something. I don't know. Oh boy. We choose to do good even when it might hurt. But real goodness is far more than a loving parent helping a child. Number 1, biblical goodness is seeking God's best in somebody else's life. This is what God calls us to. And it is often not what somebody else would choose for themselves. It may be that they want to spit it out and say, yuck. But God's best is always good. In fact, if you take the word good and you take God out of it, what are you left with? Zero. Yeah, O. And I guess it's really technically O. I'll say zero. You can't have good without God. For what goodness really is God's best for somebody's life. And a good example of biblical goodness is found to me in the person of Barnabas. I preached a message a long time ago where I called Barnabas, who was one of my main heroes in the Bible. I entitled the message, A Gardener Among Human Beings, because of the way he nurtured others and brought out the best in others. He was always sticking up for an underdog. And the Greek word, if I were to read to you from the Greek interlineary for the word good, do you know what the Greek word is? It's agathosinu. Agathosinu. Agatha comes, not Agatha Christie, but Agatha comes from that. And the Greek word is agathosinu for good, which is interpreted not just good, but strong goodness, or goodness that is active and goodness that is aggressive. And in the 9th chapter of the book of Acts, Barnabas was agathosinu. He was strong goodness. When Saul of Tarsus was converted, you know where that is? Acts, the 9th chapter. I should have put it up there. I put it in too late. Pastor Taylor had already taken off for the conference with Pastor Jim, and so they are, I believe, in Alabama, enjoying a church conference, and so. But he had already left, so it was too late to put Barnabas up there. But Barnabas, in the 9th chapter of the book of Acts, is where he really appears. He really kicks into action. And you know why? Because Saul of Tarsus is about to get saved. Now, who was Saul of Tarsus? He was a very zealous. Sorry about this. I'm so sorry. My voice is about to go down the toilet here. In chapter 9, verse number 1, it says, "Meanwhile, Saul was breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. And he went to the high priest and got the blessing of the high priest to take his persecution to Damascus. And on the road to Damascus, oh my, breathing out murderous threats toward the disciples. You know really what's... I'm unraveling. You know what was really happening here? Saul was what we would call today a terrorist. He had taken Stephen and had him stoned to death, and everybody dropped their cloak at Saul's feet. And now he was going out to do it in other places, putting Christians in prison, taking the fathers from their homes, and now he was breathing out murderous threats. And so he's on the road to Damascus. I like what verse number 3 says. Suddenly, a light from heaven flashed around him, and he fell to the ground. It just dawned on me. I wonder if he was struck by lightning, I mean, that must have been similar to what it was. He fell to the ground, and then a voice thundered, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And everybody who was with him got very silent. Now, you remember the thunderstorm that came through yesterday? Oh, how we needed rain. And it thundered and lightninged, and then it gave some rain, actually. Not enough, but sorry. But it was almost like that happened. And then I got a hold of myself here that, remember, Jesus is a gentleman. He'll never force himself upon anybody who doesn't want him. Well, guess what? Saul was a terrorist. And Jesus will be as strong as he needs to be with the people that he's dealing with. And he took this terrorist, Saul of Tarsus, and he knocked him down. Knocked him on his can. And put his lights out. I mean, he couldn't see anything. And so, in verse number 7, the men who were traveling with Saul, and who were they? It was a whole group of terrorists. The men, verse number 7 says, I like it in the King James, traveling with Saul were speechless. Isn't that great? They were speechless. No kidding, they were speechless. This bright light shines. He falls to the ground. A voice thunders from heaven, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" "Who are you?" he says. "I am Jesus." If we have a mamby-pamby picture of Jesus in our mind, get it out of your mind. Go back and read the book of Revelation where it says his hair was white like wool, and Jesus' eyes were like flames of fire, and his voice was like the sound of rushing water. And someday everybody is going to stand before him, and the Bible says every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. You know what that means? Someday Adolf Hitler will stand before him. Mao Zedong, Hitler was responsible for 50 million deaths. Mao Zedong, they say, maybe even up to 100 million. Stalin, maybe up to 60 million people. They're all going to stand before Jesus. Why? Because God has chosen him to be the judge. And one day, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is the Lord of heaven and earth. And you can either do it now, when you're not under duress, or you can do it at the judgment. And I would encourage you, do it now. Make him your Lord. Surrender to him. Don't make him force you to bow one day. Well, anyway, Barnabas, oh, brother, I kind of got off the track here. When Saul of Tarsus was converted, the Christian community was really skeptical of him. In fact, they treated him like he had leprosy. They didn't want anything to do with him. And he came to headquarters, which were in Jerusalem, met with the disciples, and they essentially shut him out. They shut him down. We've had it with you. You've killed many of our own. You've scared people, the bejeepers out of people. We're really glad you got converted. But Barnabas sought him out. In fact, he brought him to the apostles. He told them what God had done in Saul's life. And you see, Barnabas could have easily settled for being privately sympathetic with Saul of Tarsus. He could have maybe even visited him privately or written him supportive letters like, I know the apostles are afraid of you, but, I'm in your corner. I'm with you. But mind you, that is not what Barnabas did. And all those things would have been lovely if that's all Barnabas would have done. But Barnabas experienced strong goodness. Oh, boy, did I say that badly. Barnabas experienced strong goodness. He hunted Saul down. He pleaded his case to the apostles. And then Barnabas gave him a job. Barnabas said, let's the two of us go out on a missions trip. And they did it. It was the first missionary push. And they started churches everywhere in Asia Minor. Well, the same thing happened a few years later. And with John Mark. Paul did not want to take John Mark on his second missionary journey because on the first missionary journey, John Mark got what? Homesick. Yeah. He left without a proper farewell. But Barnabas suggested, let's give him a second chance. And Paul said, no. And Barnabas said, yes. And he defended Mark. He fought for him. And eventually Paul and Barnabas split. And Barnabas wound up taking, John Mark on his. And now there were two missionary groups going out instead of one. Because Barnabas was a good man. And he had agathosinu, which is strong goodness. And now they were doubling their missions effort, all because of Barnabas and his goodness. So, because of Barnabas had strong goodness in his character, because Barnabas had the fruit of the Spirit, goodness. Number 2. Oh boy, where is the clock? It's 11:05. Okay. Thank you. Goodness seeks out the best for another over the long haul. Did God demand that you change totally all at once when you became a brand new believer? No, God didn't. He was extremely patient with you, as he was extremely patient with me. Therefore, what should we do with new young converts? We should be extremely patient. It's a part of goodness. And there's an everyday test here. Remembering that we didn't change all at once. In fact, God is still changing us. He's still changing me from glory to glory, little by little. And you never get too old to be changed by God. There's an everyday test here. What would God do? What would God want for her? What would God want for him over the long haul? That's a good question to think through. We are talking in terms of long-time investment, not investing today and making a killing tomorrow. That's not what it's like with people. Recognize that there will be ups and downs with people, but it is the long term that is really important. That's what God's concerned with. So, stay the course. Try something with me here. Think of someone specific from work, a relative, somebody who could really use some goodness. Now try to dream for a moment about them. And let your dream include something like this. What would God dream for them 2 years from now in 2024? What would God dream for that person 10 years from now in 2032? I don't think I'll be around. Maybe I will. Or 20 years from now, in 2042, I'll be sayonara by that time, So, but that's the way to think about the lives that God wants us to invest in. Often we have the same dream for everyone, a 6-year-old and an 87-year-old. And those are two very, very different dreams. And I think when we begin dreaming like this, I think we're thinking more like God thinks. If we think about incremental changes, steps along the way, planting, then what comes after the planting? Watering. Water like crazy in this goofy heat. And you see, goodness involves investments in steps in the here and now and in the future. It's hard to calculate, it's hard to calculate the impact of well-timed goodness. A note of encouragement. Can you do that? You better believe you can. Anybody can write a note of encouragement. A phone call. Can you do that? Yeah, you can. Financial help. Taking someone out to dinner, inviting them into your home, helping someone get a job. Isn't that a great thing? Chad Hexum helped Josiah Sullivan get a job. And now, that was several years ago, and now Josiah has excelled so much in that job that he has been able to help numerous other people get a job. Why? Because that's what goodness does. That's the flavor of goodness. Goodness always has the long term in mind. And it always involves God's best. And well-timed steps of encouragement along the way. And guess what? It is fun to be used by God. It is a blast. In fact, we're going to have possibilities this morning. Have you ever heard of a Pentecostal handshake? I love Pentecostal handshakes. I remember when I got the first one. But they're way more fun to give. You just slide, not a Washington. Not even I'm trying to think who's on a 10. I can't even think. I know Jackson is on a 20. Who's on 100? Franklin. Yeah. It is so much fun to walk up to somebody, shake their hands, and you walk away, and you leave them with a Franklin. Well, Laura, people are going to have chances to do that. And you'll be able to take that money and use it in Africa, where it expands, where $100 is worth way more than it is here. So all of you, learn how to give a Pentecostal handshake, okay? Number 3, one very appetizing aspect of goodness is generosity. Boy, so many things about Christianity come back to generosity. And I made thousands of hospital visits over the 29 years that I was in Rochester at the Mayo Clinic. And I remember visiting an uncle who had donated a kidney to his nephew. Boy, was that exciting. That uncle was so excited. And that nephew, who was going to die if he didn't get it, because he had tried the conventional way and nothing had come up, so the uncle donated it. I remember I would get these calls. Often they were Assembly of God people, not always. And I got a call about a 34-year-old father whose 9-year-old daughter was losing all of the function in her lungs, and she was dying. And generously, her dad decided to give her part of his lung. And they transplanted that into that little girl on an experimental procedure. And it worked. It worked in the long run. I have many, many chances to visit these people because they're in for a long time. And then they would always come and seek me out when they would come back 5 years later and stuff. It's wonderful. Generously, the dad gave life to his daughter. Few of us are called to give those extraordinary gifts like that. But I remember I went to North Central Bible College in 1968. And I left in 1972, 4 years later. And I remember the snows very well. William was the teacher, and his wife was Elizabeth. She was like an angel. I bet they had me over 150 times just for lunch, supper, pie at night. And my wife cynically said they were interested in me with their daughter, but that is not true. So That was just some sour grapes on her part. And I chose you after all, sweetie. Oh, yeah, she's pointing to her watch. So we got a phone call in 1997 from the Snows, and they said, "How are you doing?" And we said, should we be honest? The church was going through a church split. I was, to a large degree, one of the targets. And it was kind of maybe similar to being in hell. Things were not going great. Let's just say it that way. And they said, "Well, we have been praying for you every single day for the last 25 years. And we felt extra burdened." How does that make you feel? Somebody prays specifically for you for 25 years, and it just went on until they died. I mean, is that goodness or is that goodness? When I pastored in Redwood Falls, I got to know this woman who, Rose was her name, a delightful woman. And she had a lot of pain in her life. I remember one of the first times we met, she said, I was having an abortion. And I woke up in the middle of it, and I heard this baby screaming with loud, strong screams. And I heard a nurse say, "What do we do with this thing?" So she has to think about that for the rest of her life. And I helped her think that through, how forgiving and loving God is. But we also had a small group leader who just took it very seriously. And he took Rose into his group. And I have no idea what he paid to pay off all her bills. But it was huge. And it didn't bother him at all because he believed that's what God wanted him to do. And I remember when her husband was getting out of prison, and Rose said, "He would like to meet you." And she said, "And he doesn't like ministers." So I'm such a squirrel. I brought my 1.5-year-old son, Christopher, put him in my left arm, and went up to the door. As soon as we pulled up, her husband, Dan, walked into the door, and he filled the door. And believe me, there was no fat. The guy was just massive. And he came up to me, and he said, "I understand you and your church have been taking care of Rose." And he said, "I can't thank you enough," and gave me the biggest hug. And I think a lot of that was because of the deacon who was their small group leader. And anyway, let me land this plane. We're going to land this sucker fast. Good can also be misunderstood. You know that. You maybe have experienced it. If you haven't, you will. Number 5, this kind of goodness reaches out and grabs opportunities. Galatians, let us not become weary in well-doing. There's a true story of a man who was really, really good. He had it made. He lived. He was rich, rich, rich. But he was a good man. he was so burdened for others that he decided to do a breathtaking thing. He gave it all up and came down to live here, and it cost him his life. He was murdered by some of the very people that he loved. He was misunderstood by so many. And though he was rich, he became poor for our sake. Let me read what 2 Corinthians 8 verse 9 says. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you through his poverty might become rich. He sought our best. He looked at the long term for us. He generously gave his life. He was wise. He was misunderstood, and he grabbed the opportunities as he saw them. That's our leader, Jesus. He is the true, ultimate, good person. And he is calling you today to simply be good.